This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight, calls for change. Advocates in Windsor demand action after the death of a man who lived in a tent.
Funds for Lebanon. Halifax teens raise tens of thousands for humanitarian relief.
And Africville honored. Hundreds gathered to celebrate the community's designation from the United Nations.
More sunshine in the mix over the next couple of days with just a few flurry chances, then watching a larger system looming for Thursday. Your full forecast is coming up.
Good evening and a welcome to our viewers in New Brunswick tonight. We begin in Nova Scotia, where community service providers are calling for more supports for vulnerable people in Windsor.
It comes after a man living in a tent died in the town last week. The CBC's Josh Hoffman reports.
Brandon Burgess has spent much of this year living rough. He knew the man who died last week.
I was really close with him. When I heard that, I almost broke down and cried. He was a really close friend of mine, and he was in a really bad position.
Burgess is now staying with his uncle, but local organizations say there have never been more people in the area experiencing homelessness.
This is a crisis, and it's not going away, it's getting worse. I've been doing this work for 30 years across the country, and this is the worst I've ever seen it.
RCMP confirmed they responded to his sudden death in Windsor and say it's not suspicious. Kent wouldn't provide any personal information about the man who died, but she says her organization spent more than a year supporting him.
This person was a regular in our lives and our friend, and he died alone in a tent unnecessarily because we didn't have supported housing in place for him.
A warming center opened in Windsor this weekend for the winter, but a volunteer running it says it's only a temporary solution.
I think really most of our folks out there just want to feel like they're worthy, and I think this work here at the warming center will show that they're worthy of some support.
Porter says this is the third death of someone experiencing homelessness in the area that she knows of in the last 2 years. She says they had been working with the man who died most recently to find him a permanent place to stay, but they just couldn't do it in time.
What supports was he not getting that he needed?
A lot. He was not getting mental health and addiction counseling, which is in supportive housing. And we don't have supportive housing here in our area, and we have very little of it in the province. This gentleman in particular was very interested in getting into a long-term, stable place that he could get help with his addictions.
A homelessness count was just done in the Annapolis Valley, partly because service providers like the Posse Project want to know how many people are living rough in the area so they have a better idea of what resources are needed to support them. But staff at the Posse Project also want to know how many people have to die before this problem is taken seriously. Josh Hoffman, CBC News, Windsor.
An emergency winter shelter is opening in Truro for the second year in a row. The shelter is funded by the province and run by the Souls Harbour Rescue Mission. Service providers say homelessness is growing in the area, and the town's one permanent homeless shelter is full every night.
There are some folks who will stay in the encampments. That's always the case, whatever town you happen to be in. There are some folks that just will choose to stay in the encampments, but we're really hoping to provide service and keep a number of them warm through the winter at least, for those who are willing to come, for sure.
This year, the shelter is increasing from 15 to 20 beds as more people need a spot inside. It opens tonight at the Connection Church and will run 7 days a week until the end of April.
Homelessness is a situation many never imagined facing, just like Kevin De Silva and Rhea Palmer, together for 32 years. But after moving to St. John from Chipman, New Brunswick, Palmer lost one of her jobs and the couple was unable to afford rent. This led them through stints with drug abuse, living in shelters and tents. They're now living in a tent trailer under an overpass.
What you thought was going to be homeless, it's a total different world. And when you get to the reality, it's like a revolving door. You're just spinning, and you don't know how you're going to get out of that revolving door. It's too many walls up. The shelter is violent. It's every night. it was hell on earth being there. It was the worst experience anybody could ever have. The shelter is disgustingly dirty 24 hours a day. The people are high there 24 hours a day, and it was just a big party for everybody. You don't get no sleep. Nobody gets sleep. You're just, and then you're up and you're made to go out into the streets at 8 o'clock in the morning. They drop you back downtown, and you have to fend for yourself. So that dead-headed winter, you're carrying bags, you're freezing, and you're waiting until 8 o'clock at night till you get back into the shelter. You can say, why do we haven't got a job? How do you go to work, and where do you come after work? I mean, like, you know, you come back to your tent. Where do you get, like, get in a shower, cooking your food? Everything's a task. It isn't like simple as say, I'm just going to go to the fridge, get something to eat. You have to go out and go places, you know, to go eat and try to figure that all out. Now, if you're working an 8-hour day, you don't have time for a lot of things.
How did you come into this camper?
Oh, we found one on Marketplace.
It would get you off the ground. Was the main thing. It was to get her off the ground, right?
Why here?
Well, just snow and the rain. I thought this would be the best place for it, and I wanted to get a little bit of attention, just for the fact to try to get more help through a fresh start, and you know, get the ball rolling, because we waited a long time for a place.
And our first look at the weather now with Ryan Snoddon.
Brian.
Yeah, and you know what? There was some sunshine, which was not too bad over the last couple of days. We all could enjoy that, but chilly temperatures for sure. Welcome to December. As we look at those highs today, you can see we did squeak up above the freezing mark for many places in Nova Scotia, closer to the freezing mark and below the freezing mark for our friends joining us tonight in New Brunswick. And yeah, tomorrow even a little bit cooler again. As we look at the outlook for tomorrow, you can see temperatures closer to the freezing mark in Nova Scotia. Along the Atlantic coastline is our best chance of getting just above the freezing mark. And in New Brunswick, cooler still, with temperatures ranging between about 0 and -3. Those northwest winds, 20 gusting 30 to 40. That'll be a noticeable difference from the last couple of days where those winds have been really, really light. Flurries tonight in through the valley and the western parts of Nova Scotia, as well as northern New Brunswick. Tomorrow, best chance of flurries is the closer to the Gulf of St. Lawrence you are, as this trough swings through, and we will be seeing those flurries in the mix. More chances for flurries for Wednesday, and watching a bigger system for Thursday. Tom and Amy will talk about that with your 7-day.
Yeah, do stay tuned.
December is here.
You bet. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, the executive director of the Nova Scotia Firefighter School is rejecting calls for him to resign in the midst of controversy over the death of a firefighter at the school. Skylar Blackie was a member of the Truro Fire Department. He was killed when an expired extinguisher he was using at the school exploded. The school held its annual general meeting on the weekend. Members of the Firefighters Union and Blackie's sister attended to reinforce their call for John Cunningham's resignation.
We're not willing to partner with this current leadership team. They've demonstrated a lack of accountability, a lack of transparency, and a lack of doing the right thing when it matters. And we wanted to make sure it was clear, without change, you won't have partnership.
Status quo is working for them. He has his job and he's never been questioned, and it's an old boys club. There was 7 people in there. That's not a representation of Nova Scotia Fire. And they're comfortable, and they're getting away with it, so why wouldn't they?
Cunningham said restoring confidence in the school will require transparency, accountability, and meaningful action.
A group of teenagers in the HRM has been fundraising in support of Lebanon, where more than 1 million people have been displaced due to conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. As Selena Alders reports, the teens have raised tens of thousands of dollars for humanitarian aid so far.
These grade 10 students have been watching the crisis in Lebanon unfold from afar, so they wanted to step up and help. That's why they created Heart for Lebanon HRM. The fundraiser and awareness campaign has raised nearly $20,000 since October. The Canadian government is matching that, bringing the total to about $40,000 so far.
I'm happy that I'm able to help my home, my country, my people. I'm happy that I'm able to support those in need.
A ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah took effect on Wednesday, but the devastation continues as both sides accuse each other of violating the agreement. During more than a year of fighting, tens of thousands of Israelis have fled their homes in northern Israel due to rocket attacks by Hezbollah. In Lebanon, about 1.2 million people have been displaced by Israeli airstrikes and ground operations.
They don't deserve this, right? It's very inhumane, and I believe that there needs to be something done about this cause, and I think that this is why I started this fundraiser specifically.
The money raised will go toward efforts by the Canadian and Lebanese Red Cross. It will be used to help civilians with shelter, food, medical supplies, and other essentials. 15-year-old Samuel Basile is one of the other students helping with the cause.
It's very heartbreaking because you just think like that, imagine if that was you in that situation. And we're blessed here to live in Canada where it's peaceful, but over in the Middle East it's not, and that's really hard, so we try to make as big of a change as we can.
Shadrawi and Basile both have family ties to the Middle Eastern country, but will not be able to return until things de-escalate. In the meantime, they're doing what they can to help support those who have been affected by this conflict. Selena Alders, CBC News, Dartmouth.
An historic wooden church in Digby County is slated for demolition. The century-old St. Marie Church was built by the Acadian community and is thought to be the largest wooden church in North America. Like many older churches, the building is in need of repair that the community cannot afford. A donor had come forward to help, but that arrangement fell through. Now, the Archdiocese says it's going ahead with plans to have the church torn down. But some are hoping it can be done carefully.
There are ways that you can take buildings apart, and we know there are companies in Nova Scotia and also across Canada who do this, who take them apart so that the wood can be recycled and that they can do it in consultation with the community, and the community can be involved in the process.
If the demolition goes ahead, there are plans to remove all artifacts and stained glass windows first.
About 200 people gathered in Africville last night to celebrate the historic Black community's United Nations designation as a special place of history.
The site in Halifax's North End has been recognized as the first one in Canada to become a place of history and memory linked to the slave trade.
That was revealed in Paris in October, and as Gareth Hampshire tells us, community members finally got to celebrate.
The UNESCO designation for the National Historic Site of Africville acknowledges its connection to the slave trade. It makes the link that formerly enslaved people helped build the community, and also documents how residents paid taxes but never got paved roads or even running water before the community was destroyed in the 1960s.
Now the world knows just what Africville went through, the hardships, and in my opinion, the way our foremothers and fathers were railroaded off their land.
Beatrice Wilkins is among about 15 people who were born in Africville and are introduced at the event. These are some of the ones who had to leave, sharing the songs they used to sing. They hope more people across the country now hear about their struggle, how slavery continues to have consequences today through racism and discrimination.
We're really hoping that this opens up new conversations in Canada and that people become more honest about the reality of the history in Canada, and especially in Nova Scotia.
There is renewed optimism that this first-of-its-kind recognition will lead to improvements people have been pushing for years.
And we're still fighting the fight.
Instead of having to put up a tent, the site should have an interpretive center for events, according to the Heritage Trust, creating new opportunities for the replica church that's now the museum.
We're under a tent, and an interpretive center is long overdue. Transit services, sidewalks. This is not easily accessible.
There's a lot of work to do, but for now, people are grateful their stories being told, not just in Canada, but around the world. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Halifax.
A peek at downtown Halifax through our Harbour Cam. Ryan is up next with his full weather forecast.
Welcome back. Flooding is becoming an ongoing issue in Sussex, New Brunswick. The town, which sits along the Kennebecasis River, has had several flood incidents over the past decade.
The latest happening last February, which forced 24 people out of their homes and closed more than 12 streets. Now the town is using drones to help fast-track work to mitigate flooding. The CBC's Rhythm Ratty has more.
The town of Sussex is using drone technology to map land topography in areas of their upcoming flood mitigation infrastructure. According to the town, it's a more efficient way to fast-track the data collection process.
Moving to start point.
So we're here today. It's one of the 4 project sites that's been identified for topographic survey. So we're flying the LiDAR drone to collect the topographic information that we'll use for the project.
As well as the manual.
As well as the manual survey, yes. So this is the view that's happening right now. This is off of the sensor. These are the photos that it's capturing. And on this side, you can see the points it's collecting and making the actual 3D model as it flies. Right now it's set to showing some elevation differences. So you see like the red will be the top of the trees, that sort of thing. It collects the vegetation and the topography and buildings and hydro lines, posts, that sort of thing. And then we post-process afterwards too.
And does this also indicate what's under the ground?
Not under the ground, no. We're collecting hundreds of millions of points, 500 points per square meter sort of thing, where doing it manually, you're collecting 1 point at a time. And over large areas like this, you can't compare the accuracy.
Return to home. Flight mission complete.
We're flying routes that would be used, the data would be used in several projects to make the overall strategy happen. And we're using the technology to speed up the process of the data collection and allowing our engineers to get to work sooner. Our next project step is a prerequisite to protect Ward 2 subdivision in and around the Meadow Crescent area.
2 years here, and I think probably in total around 10 flooding events or so, just with where our house is located and how low we are. We tend to get groundwater and we tend to get the overland flooding too, so we get kind of a combination of both. It lingers, you know, and we've spoken with neighbors as well, and ones that have been here far longer, and you know, they've said, you know, they used to enjoy the sound of rain, and now they kind of dread it. So yeah, I think if we could get back to a point where you enjoy the sound of rain hitting your roof and knowing that it's not going to be in the basement, then I think that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
So I lose about 5 feet every time it floods. It will extend because it has to. There's so much water, and it's, you know, like we're talking water that high. So it'll be away at it, and we would lose more for sure. A lot of people that don't flood say, well, how do you do that? We used to have flood parties, you know, because you have to deal with it a certain way, and getting worked up and getting upset doesn't help. We amalgamated with Sussex, and I don't know if this might have happened if we hadn't amalgamated. So I'm thankful that they're finally going to do something, and we'll have to wait and see what happens.
All right, well, no risk of flooding this past weekend. Wasn't that lovely?
Oh, you know, everybody had kind of a spring in their step. It was just so nice to see the sunshine after a long break.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of folks getting things done, like Christmas lights hung up and leaves. And Tom did both of those.
A superstar this weekend.
Big weekend, 17 bags.
Wow.
Yep. And it adds up.
And heavy, wet leaves at this point,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, exactly.
I didn't hear you complain, though.
No,
Today.
I didn't see either of you in my yard either, which you know, you keep saying you're going to show up sometime. But
I don't think I ever promised that.
Yeah,
a good weekend.
Yeah, for sure, a great weekend, and a few folks getting their Christmas trees as well this weekend. Yours truly. So it was a great weekend for sure for getting out. And if you were lucky enough to be outside today, it was also a great day. Have a look at current temperatures right now. We're -6 in Bathurst, and again, in case you're just joining us, we are welcoming our friends in New Brunswick to the program this evening, so including the New Brunswick weather for them, of course. And as you can see, current temps right now across Nova Scotia ranging between 0 in Yarmouth and -3 in Truro. Looks like our cool spot. Actually, a couple of plus side temps there as well. Granted Tang right now at +1, and Halifax coming in downtown at 2 on the plus side. It will be cooler tomorrow, no doubt about that. You can see the sustained winds. That is really kind of what's been more welcome than even the sunshine over the last couple of days, is those light winds plus the sunshine. Just a beautiful combination. Not too gusty out there. Briar Island is gusting to 33, but overall the wind's nice and quiet. Satellite radar picture, couple of flurries rolling through southwestern parts of New Brunswick right now. Another little burst in through Cobequid Bay. A couple of flurries earlier in the Halifax area. That little burst is now moving offshore, and a few flurries just moving offshore from Sydney as well. As we back things out, we've got this trough from Labrador back over to the Great Lakes, and boy, did you see how much snow the Great Lakes saw, or some folks in the Great Lakes, in these streamers, which continue, these snow squalls north of Toronto in the Bracebridge area. 140 centimeters of snow in some locations there just east of Georgian Bay over the weekend. Incredible amounts of snow there. So that does continue, believe it or not. For us, we're going to be seeing a chance for some flurries tonight, primarily in through the valley, down through the Yarmouth area, Bathurst up towards Miramichi, and the Northumberland shore and into Cape Breton. That's going to be our greatest chances for tonight. There's that little burst coming in overnight tonight. That will push down towards Shelburne, Lunenburg, and even Halifax. A couple of flakes possible before morning. Tomorrow, by the time we're hitting the road tomorrow morning, it is going to be pretty chilly, colder than this morning certainly. Into the afternoon, the closer you are to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the greater chance you have of seeing some flurries tomorrow. So it will be that Northumberland shore and into Cape Breton, the Miramichi back through Bathurst and Acadian Peninsula region. The greatest chance for Cape Breton and you folks here back towards Antigonish is going to be into the later part of the day. Not a bad day overall. In fact, a lot of sunshine early here, clouds building, and then that chance for a flurry late day. Though note those westerly winds will pick up to around 20. Central Nova Scotia looking at a chance for some flurries. Tatamagouche down through New Glasgow into the afternoon. Quiet for the metro area tomorrow. And again, looking at that chance for flurries overnight tonight for you folks here in the west. But those skies will clear, and we're looking at a nice day for tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Campbellton, Bathurst, Miramichi, chance for flurries tomorrow, and then back into the south, and you can see mix of sun and cloud, really, really nice day. Though those northerly winds will be a little bit breezier than they have been over the last couple of days. Now for Wednesday's outlook across the Maritimes, we're looking at just some isolated flurry chances across Nova Scotia. New Brunswick looks fairly quiet. Notably, a little bit cooler again on Wednesday, -2 to -5 across New Brunswick. Temperatures a little more widespread, just below the freezing mark across Nova Scotia with those couple of flurries. Now, that area of high pressure will sink off to the south. This is our next weather maker. Thursday morning, that snow arrives in New Brunswick. A snowy start to the day there. The potential for some accumulating snow over northern higher terrain areas of Nova Scotia on Thursday morning into the afternoon, though. A change to rain across Nova Scotia. New Brunswick, this looks like a heavy wet snow with a change to rain across southern parts of the province. And then eventually we will change to rain for the southern half. But that is, again, going to be a problematic system, but not too concerned about the mixing for Nova Scotia. There's New Brunswick's forecast. Temperatures bumping up to 2 on the plus side, -2 for Friday. And then temperatures really cooling off for the weekend. And for Nova Scotia, again, we are going to be bumping up to 5 or 6 degrees Thursday afternoon, and notably cooler into the weekend as well on the backside of that system. Does look like temps will warm next week, Tom and Amy, but very, very December-ish here for the first 7 days or so.
Welcome to December. Okay, thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Coming up, a recent report is raising serious concerns about firefighting across the country. A new report from the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs raises serious concerns about glaring gaps in national firefighting coordination, aging equipment, and a lack of proper training, and that firefighters can't keep up with the potential demands of rapid housing development. Greg Jones is a board member with the association and the fire chief in Amherst. Mr. Jones, what concerns you the most about the findings of this report?
You know, what concerns me the most, the findings of the report, is right across our country, we're starting to see an increase in aging equipment and a lack of coordination. So one thing we're asking for here in Ottawa while we're up here this week is that for the federal government to consider a National Fire Administration, something to provide leadership and coordination around new policies coming out from the federal government.
Well, how would that help you deal with the realities that you're facing now, including things like trying to keep up with housing developments?
You know, the reality of it is, at the end of the day, it would help the fire service be much better prepared. One thing that we do have that happens a fair amount, and the rapid housing development is one of them. Most communities have prepared themselves for the increase of rapid house development, but not all have. When you think of the rural areas in the Maritimes, not all have considered it, but not all can afford it. So the aging equipment does affect that a fair amount. One thing in 2013 the federal government took away was a Joint Emergency Preparedness Fund. And it was a fund to help fire departments and municipalities buy new and much needed equipment to combat changes in their environment. We're asking the federal government to bring that back again, a modernized version of it, to allow municipalities and fire services in our region change exactly what they need to do to offset the changes that are coming forward.
The report also touches on wildfire readiness, that it's not where it needs to be in many places across the country. Training, a big issue there, I gather. Can you explain that?
Yeah, very good question. One thing that does happen is that there's been funding come down from the federal government to support wildfire initiatives right across our country. But the unfortunate part, it's related to training and equipment with the provinces and territories. One piece that was missed was the training and assistance and equipment needs for municipalities. For us in the Maritimes, that's a big problem, a major issue for us. And the cost is getting a hit there, unfortunately. So one thing that we've asked for is the modernized Joint Emergency Preparedness Fund. That will assist departments in Atlantic Canada to move forward, to buy the equipment they need for firefighting. But we also want the federal government to realize they missed that piece of the puzzle. They missed the local government that actually are boots on the ground that start all the work when a wildfire happens.
And many of those departments in the municipalities, certainly in this province and in this region, are volunteer-based. I mean, that is another added challenge, isn't it, in terms of trying to get people training and get people involved?
That's right. Volunteer fire service is a big thing in Atlantic Canada, for sure. When you think of just Nova Scotia, the numbers are 7,400 volunteer firefighters. They have a lion's share that go out and do a lot of the work. We have a lot of career folks that work across their area as well. But there's a lot of firefighters in Atlantic Canada that are busy, extremely busy. They're doing the best they can with what they have. And the fire service will do whatever they can at a moment's notice to make sure the general public is always safe and that we're safe as well as firefighters. The
firefighting business, I gather, changing all the time. One of the new challenges presented and spelled out in the report is the lithium-ion battery fires that are happening more frequently. How does that challenge, let's say a firefighting squad in Nova Scotia when it comes to combating that kind of a fire?
You know, the unfortunate part is we haven't seen the major impacts of lithium-ion battery fires in the Atlantic region and in primary Nova Scotia. We're starting to see some fires are starting to develop more often, something as simple as a cell phone to a computer to some vehicles and scooters. But there are major impacts from lithium-ion batteries. Recently, I was in Montreal at a conference and an opportunity, unfortunately, to see a full container ship fully involved of lithium batteries that were on fire. That's a major impact. And for fire services, it causes an issue where you need a great copious amount of water to deal with those fires. And it does cause a much more needed need to find products and materials and equipment to offset that. And one true issue we have is the cost of buying the equipment to do that. That's why we're asked for a modernized version of the Joint Emergency Preparedness Program to help offset that.
And just quickly before I let you go, you're pointing out the lack of preparedness in some cases, in some communities right across this country. Is government hearing you? Are you getting anything back from them to suggest there might be some changes?
One thing I will say is that I enjoy conversations with government of all levels to find ways to get the proper assistance in the fire service. For us in Nova Scotia, we've been doing a lot of work with government prior to the election, and we will right after the election as well. There's change coming. Very happy with the conversation that we continue to have both at all levels of government, and I hope that we do get to move forward.
We will watch for it. Greg Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, the Federal Auditor General highlights issues with Ottawa's pandemic loan program for small businesses.
Joe Biden pardons his son Hunter for federal gun and tax convictions, despite previous pledges not to. Welcome back. Canada's Auditor General says a federal program designed to help small businesses during the pandemic was poorly managed.
Karen Hogan says Ottawa gave too much control to a single contractor. Billions of dollars went to ineligible companies, and billions more in loans have not been repaid. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich reports.
It was a program meant to help small businesses get by during COVID-19 lockdowns. But Canada's Auditor General says there was little done to ensure Ottawa got value for money.
I would expect a basic level of due diligence and monitoring of expenditures, regardless of whether a pandemic exists.
The Canada Emergency Business Account, or CEBA for short, distributed almost $50 billion in loans to nearly 1 million small businesses. Most of the money was recovered, but $8.5 billion is outstanding, and an estimated $3.5 billion went to ineligible businesses.
While action on defaulted loans is just beginning. Value for money will be further compromised without better monitoring and improved plans to recover defaulted loans.
Export Development Canada, a Crown corporation, was responsible for delivering CEBA. But the Auditor General found it didn't have the capacity, expertise, or infrastructure to manage this size of a program. So it relied on sole source contracts with a single vendor, a professional services and IT multinational company called Accenture, without strong checks or balances in place.
Isn't it more proof that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption?
Conservatives compare the situation to the ArriveCan controversy, surrounding excessive reliance on contractors to develop a COVID-19 travel app.
Just when you can't get a worse report than ArriveCan, along comes EDC saying, hold my beer.
It's interesting to listen to colleagues who, if you were to take them seriously, we might have all forgotten that COVID even happened.
Liberals are pushing back, calling CEBA a lifeline during the pandemic.
There was an urgency to ensure that small businesses, especially that were taking the CEBA loan, for example, would have delivery of funds as soon as possible.
The Auditor General says she would have expected a program like CEBA to be administered by the public service, not a Crown corporation that is only partially accepting her recommendation for more work to identify all ineligible businesses that receive loans and recover the money they owe the federal government. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Joe Biden arrived in Angola today for a 3-day visit to sub-Saharan Africa. It's a trip meant to counter China's growing influence on the continent. But it's being overshadowed by criticism at home for a stunning policy reversal. Yesterday, the president pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, something he repeatedly promised not to do. Richard Madden has the details on that from Washington.
President Joe Biden is facing fierce political backlash from both sides of the aisle after breaking his long-held promise by pardoning his son, Hunter, not only for his tax and gun convictions, but all other possible crimes he may have committed going back 10 years. Now, this may be the most sweeping presidential pardon since Ford pardoned Nixon back in the 70s. It also undermines what Biden said repeatedly, that nobody is above the law and he would not interfere in his son's case.
I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
In a statement last night defending his surprise decision, Biden used words that could sound like something Donald Trump would say, accusing his rivals of weaponizing the justice system against Hunter. He goes on to say no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. Many analysts believe Biden changed his mind to protect Hunter from an incoming administration that's threatened revenge against their political opponents.
Like many of Trump's opponents, he's worried about how Trump will use presidential power. So I think President Biden is willing to live with the inconsistency and the change in position to protect his son.
Now, Biden reportedly made this surprise decision after spending Thanksgiving holiday weekend with his family. But some Democrats have joined the chorus of Republicans accusing Biden of lying and putting his family ahead of the country.
This is an abuse of power, and I think it needs to be corrected. I don't believe the pardon power should be as broad as it is, and we can clearly see how it can be used and abused, even with righteous cause.
President-elect Donald Trump, who's also railed against the justice system, linked Hunter Biden's pardon with the January 6 insurrectionists, asking, does the pardon given by Joe to Hunter include the J6 hostages? Those are Trump's words, hostages, who've now been imprisoned for years. Now, Trump takes office just 7 weeks from now and could well use Biden's pardon to give himself more political cover should Trump decide to pardon his allies. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
The incoming Trump presidency is also raising concerns about trade. The Ontario city of Sault Ste. Marie and the Michigan city with the same name, just across the border, have always had close ties. But Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on Canadian goods could hurt both cities a lot. Katie Nicholson has more.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for your Sioux.
The Michigan Sioux Eagles facing off against their cross-border rivals, Ontario's Sioux Thunderbirds. But it's another battle between the two neighbors that has gripped people in this steel town. President-elect Donald Trump's proposed 25% tariff on Canadian goods, worrying Americans.
It would affect us considerably because people wouldn't be going over there shopping, buying their gas.
And Canadians alike.
I'm sure it would cause a lot of, possibly close down our companies that are keeping the city together.
Algoma Steel employs nearly 4,000 people, including contractors from both sides of the border. The last time Trump briefly put a 25% tariff on Canadian steel in 2017, there were dozens of layoffs in the industry here.
It was definitely going to be, cuts in jobs.
And if that does happen, the Chamber of Commerce isn't mincing words.
Something like that for our city would be devastating.
A short drive over the bridge that spans the two Sioux to this Michigan crepe shop where anxiety is also high.
It's a matter of whether or not the Canadian population continues to come over and support local businesses on this side of the bridge. We have no idea what it's going to look like, so.
People here have deep roots, family and friends on both sides of the border. Mayor Matthew Shoemaker meets his American counterpart across the river regularly for a drink.
We want to make sure that those ties are close so that if we need to have them advocate against the tariffs, if they are imposed, then we think we have an ally there that will lend us their support.
No one knows whether the incoming Trump administration is actually going to enact these tariffs, but if it does, it's clear. It's something people on both sides of this bridge are going to have to work through together. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario.
The situation in Syria deteriorated even further today. Syrian forces launched a counterattack on rebel forces, and already dozens of people have been killed in the escalating violence. It started last Friday when rebels launched a surprise attack and took control of Syria's largest city, Aleppo. Margaret Evans is in the region with the latest developments.
The flames threatening to engulf Syria and beyond, reignited by seemingly dormant rebel groups emerging to seize Aleppo from government forces. This was Syria's response, airstrikes in Aleppo and in Idlib province, home to a myriad of opposition groups backed by Turkey. Their capture of Aleppo, led by a former al-Qaeda affiliate, was carried out with breathtaking speed.
Not only me, everybody was surprised, including the regime in Syria.
Turkey, though, insists this Middle East analyst and former Lebanese general must have known.
They cannot move out of the border of Idlib without green light of Turkey. So Turkey was not at all surprised.
Turkey's foreign minister met his Iranian counterpart Monday, saying Damascus must reconcile with its people and what he called the legitimate opposition. Syria insists it will put the insurgents down. This is the head of the armed forces out meeting soldiers in villages reportedly recaptured from the rebels. This is our land and our pride, he said. And in Syria's northeast, there were huge demonstrations in Rojava, the de facto autonomous region run by the Kurds, who accuse the rebel opposition groups of now also attacking Kurdish fighters near Aleppo. Countries including France, Germany, Britain, and the United States are calling for de-escalation. But there are fears that Syria's long-simmering civil war is just heating up again. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Beirut.
The province of Ontario is on track to have its worst year yet for emergency room closures. That's according to a CBC News data analysis. Some rural ERs are now daytime only. Julie Ireton shows us the findings and reaction you won't see anywhere else.
This emergency department in rural southwestern Ontario tops the list with the highest number of hours closed this year.
You love to be number one, but not in this contest.
That department is part of a CBC News analysis. It found ERs and urgent care centres across Ontario were closed for more hours in 2024 than in any of the previous 3 years. That's because more ERs permanently reduced their hours, mostly in rural areas. The Chesley Hospital's emergency is one of those. Now it only operates between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. It's closed on weekends. Seniors in Chesley recently voiced concerns at a public meeting. This resident had a mild heart attack when the ER was closed. He had to wait for an ambulance and travel to another hospital.
If I'd had a serious heart attack, you wouldn't be interviewing me right now.
Yeah, my biggest concern is people will just delay, and then when they do finally go, it's a more serious condition.
I have the fear of something happening during the night when our ER is not open.
Most closures are due to a shortage of nurses. The Ontario government has pledged to train more nurses and provide fill-in doctors in remote and rural communities.
The health minister was asked this morning about the high number of scheduled closures.
Yes, it was concerning us. Yes, we continue to work with our hospital partners through Ontario Health to make sure that they have sufficient staff.
Ontario isn't alone. ER closures are a problem from Nova Scotia to British Columbia.
It certainly appears that the situation is worsening across the country.
Doctors, nurses, and advocates worry lives are at risk unless there are system-wide solutions. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Yeah, we're getting into December now.
Yeah.
A couple
Yes.
days, starting to feel like it a little bit.
A little later in the week looks a little messy, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Thursday in particular, keeping an eye on that system if you're traveling around. But it has looked a little more festive.
That's
It's
true.
a light
That's
dusting,
true.
and even that widespread frosty setup this morning. It just really looked quite festive. And here's a picture that will likely put you in the festive spirit. We're going to be zooming in on the valley. And of course, many Christmas tree farms there, but this one in Nicholsville.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Each
Those
tree
trees are frosted.
Just painted a little bit with frost, aren't they?
Yes. James Kane from Kane's, not exactly sure of the name, but I do know it involves Kane. Christmas trees there in Nicholsville, and it looks like they've got a few good trees there. I do say so myself. What a beautiful shot indeed. Ryan's picks at cbc.ca. We'll say, after weeks of cloudiness, Ryan's picks inbox is overflowing again.
Folks are excited to see the sun and document it.
They do, for sure. And so thanks to everybody for contributing. Really appreciate it. Tomorrow, there's the setup, and again, across the Maritimes, looking at temperatures at and below the freezing mark in through New Brunswick, and we'll see a little more widespread cool air in place for Wednesday. As you can see on the other side of this trough, we just get a little bit cooler again. Few more flurries in the mix for Wednesday, and then here comes that next system, which will spread snow in on the leading edge. It does look like a pretty quick change to rain for Nova Scotia, but could still be a bit slick across parts of Nova Scotia on Thursday. More widespread snow in the mix for New Brunswick.
All right. Speaking of becoming festive, people all across the Maritimes are really getting into the Christmas spirit.
Yes, this group of neighbors in the Fredericton area have come together to decorate a tree in their subdivision for the holidays. They did so after watching owner Doug Hetherington work on the tree for years.
Hetherington says it's nice to see people in his community getting to know each other through this project. The tree lights will remain on display until the new year.
Not a lot of lights.
Sure is. That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.